Let's talk about performing. If you're an acoustic musician, you're going to get a chance to perform every now and again. And where do you start? I'm not big on performing anymore. I've kind of done that thing through my younger years, and now I like to just kind of stay home and not haul a bunch of gear around. There are some real downsides to performing. You got to haul your own gear. You can take a guitar or two, take an amplifier out there. You go out there and play. Especially if you're a solo musician, you're doing this stuff all by yourself. So you got to have lightweight gear. You got to park. If you live in a city, you're going to have to park somewhere away from the venue and then haul your stuff back and forth down the street. There's a chance your stuff can get stolen or damaged. There's a lot of downsides to playing out. And what are you playing for the most part? Peanuts. Playing is a part of being a musician. We play music for our own enjoyment sometimes, but sometimes to complete the circle, you need to have an audience. You need to get out there and make a connection with people. There's a special thing that happens when people enjoy your music and you're performing for people. You're putting your heart out there, your soul out there, and they receive that, and it creates this moment, and it's a very wonderful thing. But those moments are fleeting, and they don't happen often, and most of the time you're just sitting there in a coffee house masking the sound of people chewing and the cappuccino maker. So that's kind of the reality of the way performing goes. But I got some notes here. If you, let's just take a look at the most common acoustic gigs you're going to get, and that's going to be either coffee house gigs or maybe a restaurant or an open mic. So let's talk about this couple things. I just jotted down a few notes here if you don't mind me kind of going by with them here. First thing, if you play in coffee house or restaurants, you have to realize what your purpose is. There is to fill sonic space. You're not putting on a show. I used to play in a coffee house in downtown Anchorage, Alaska, when I lived up in Alaska. A fun place. It's named Cyrano's. I don't know if it's even still there. I've been out of Alaska since the 90s. But it was kind of the happening place, and I used to have Tuesday nights was my little thing there, and I'd play, and it was always fun to play. I'd play for $25, whatever tips I could earn, and they'd usually feed me a meal, which was not a bad deal because their food was really good. You sat out at the little, by the front door there, they had a little mini kind of little stage, and you'd play there, and it was right underneath a heat vent, or the vent was coming out of the kitchen, so the air was always warm. And you'd come home smelling like soup, which is a lot better than coming home smelling like cigarette smoke from a bar or something like that. But I'd come home smelling like soup from the kitchen. But they had really good food, and it was fun to play there. And it was kind of artistically satisfying, and that was like my regular deal there for a while. Back in the early to mid 90s or so is when I was doing that. So, but realize that your primary purpose is to fill sonic space, to create an atmosphere. If they've got the radio on, it's doing the same thing. People aren't there to see you necessarily. They had one guy that used to play there. He was like a national dulcimer champion, and he'd come on every week and he'd play the same show, and it was a show. The songs were in the same order, the same songs. Even the banter between the songs was the same stuff. It was what he had rehearsed, and they told me they like to see me come in because they didn't know what I was going to do. I would always do something a little bit different, and I didn't really intrude, but this dude was there to put on a show in this little bitty coffee house. It was just kind of out of place, and they kind of got annoyed with him sometime. So you're not putting on a show. One of the things you want to ask, depending on the coffee house, you want to ask the manager or the owner what their business model depended on. Do they depend on turnover, or do they depend on having a crowd linger there and continue to spend money? Now, this will vary with the establishment. If you're playing in a place where they want turnover, then they want people in, order a meal, order a drink. They sit down and do their thing, and they want them out of there to clear the seat for the next pay-in customer. In that case, if they want turnover, you need to set up your song list accordingly. You need to set up maybe your song list, about every fourth song have a fast, kind of loud tune. Because what that does is that gives people the polite cover to leave. People are not being rude. It's like, oh, that guy's loud and obnoxious, and I'm going to leave now. You don't want to run them off that way. But what happens is when you play a loud, more boisterous song, it gives them the sonic cover to get up and leave, take their stuff, go out without disturbing the room. And so you're providing it for them. When you do that about every fourth song, they come in, they have their coffee, they eat their sandwich or something, 10, 15 minutes, boom, they're out of there, and then the next customer's in the seat, and the place is making money. If the venue is making money, then they're going to have you back. If you have the ability to draw a crowd, let's say like I had a regular kind of Tuesday night crowd that would kind of come in and see me after I'd been there for a while, that's nice too. They want them to stay. because they're going to stay there to listen to your music. They're going to listen to a couple of sets worth of music. They're going to keep ordering, buying. They're going to get a cheesecake. They're going to get their double half calf, whatever, chai, some kind of thing, and they're going to order, and then the venue's going to make money. But if you're in a situation like that, that's different. You're going to set your set list up to bring the people in and to keep them there for a while. So you'll start off with maybe something, good, fast, fun, engaging, and then you kind of mellow it out, and then they'll sit there and converse, and they'll enjoy their meal, they'll enjoy their dessert, their coffee, talk to their friends. You are background for their pleasant moment, but you're not the center of the attention. At times, you will see the people become conscious of aware of you. Maybe you play a song that has some emotional connection to them, and they'll kind of glance your way. You just kind of give them a little nod, and you play on. They're very happy with that. One of the things you want to watch, especially if you're a finger picker and you're doing this alternating bass thing, watch people's toes. You'll see people start to tap their foot. They may not be really consciously engaging with you. There was a lot of college students who used to come in and study for finals during certain times of the year. And you'd see them, their nose are in the book, and they're drinking their coffee, their cappuccino. They're trying to stay awake so they can keep on cramming. But you notice that their toes are going. They're not consciously listening to you, but they're tapping their foot. The music's getting in. So you kind of become aware of the cues that people are tuned in to listening to you, even if they're not applauding every song. If you take requests, that's a thing that's a common deal. Like, oh, do you know such and such a song? And you might say, well, yeah, sure, I know it. And if you know that one, bump it up into the list. You may end up getting a tip in your tip jar. We'll talk about tip jars in just a minute. But if you don't know the song, maybe you know another song by that same artist. Or maybe you know something that's very similar in mood or the period or something, and you can offer that. I've actually had people say, hey, do you know something by Simon and Garfunkel? And Simon and Garfunkel, number one, was a duet. And if you're a single performer, you're not going to do a duet justice. And so I might say, oh, yeah, well, or I say, I know something by Simon and Garfunkel, and I'd play some other kind of thing by Gordon Lightfoot or something from that era. A lot of times people don't know the whole set list thing, especially if it's something. I always like pulling out the more obscure songs by different artists. They would go, oh, that was great, thank you, and they'd pay you a tip for playing the Simon and Garfunkel for them, and the song was not by Simon and Garfunkel. Excuse me while I pick this up a second. I dropped my list on the floor. So that kind of covers the pacing of your set. Now, another thing that you might run into is playing at open mics. Now, open mics is kind of how I got my start. I graduated from high school up in Alaska. My family, over a series of a couple of military moves, where my father was in the Coast Guard. We ended up back in Virginia and ended up playing at a place called Ramblin' Conrad's. Ramblin' Conrad's was a cool place. It was a music store, but they used to have like open mic nights, and every now and again they would bring in national level folk music artists. And so I went there one time for one of the open mics. I played. They give you like a 15 or a 20-minute set, and that's enough time with a little bit of chatter to do maybe 3 songs. 4 if you had short songs, but mostly 3 songs is pretty much all you're going to get at an open mic. So you got to plan your material. If you're going to only have 3 songs and you want to invite you back, you need to have something strong. So start with your strongest song, snag the people, do something that really belts it out there, because people are just going to be with you just for a little bit. Now, if you're the artist that does just mellow stuff, that's fine. Just make your whole set mellow for those 3 songs. You've established a vibe and identity. People know, oh, here comes the mellow guy. They'll have you back, and they'll know where to put you in the set. Maybe not to start off, maybe in the middle, maybe towards the end. They may have 8 or 10 people that are going to perform that night. So in an open mic thing, kind of gauge your material along that line. Come in strong and do your stuff. And this is a show. I know it's only short, but it's a show. You're putting on a show for the people there. Be humble, but be confident. Go out there, do your thing. And if they ask you back, feel really proud that they asked you back. I was very blessed in that I got to, after playing the open nights 2 or 3 times, the open mic nights, they had the great interpreter of like Reverend Gary Davis music and ragtime guitar, Roy Bookbinder. He was coming in to play national level folk artist. They said, hey, how about you come open for him? That was awesome. Another time they had Lorraine Duezy of the group. I think she was with Pentangle. I'm not sure. Don't remember who she was with, but she was a solo working solo at this time, and she was another national level, very well known artist. And they asked me to come in and open for her set. So that was really a very neat thing to be able to do that, and it's a real honor. You should feel honored if they ask you to come in and open for somebody who's like a national level act. That's a kind of cool thing. Now, I never lived in a big place like New York City or somewhere where they would have really where a national level thing was a constant deal. I was always in these smaller markets, smaller venues, but I had just as much fun, and I made a fair amount of music and a little bit of money playing out like that. Let me go to my second page here. Okay, check if you're playing at a coffee house. Check to make sure that you can put out a tip jar. Some places don't mind. Some places their staff. If you're taking tips, you're cutting into the tips that the staff that works there is going to get, and so you don't want to be taken away from them. I had some nights where I made more tips than what the venue made in sales. That's unfortunate when that happens. In that case, you need to kind of do something, maybe give back a little bit. Merchandise. If you have CDs, ask if you can put those out and sell them on the counter there. Offer to do a split with the retailer. You do a 50-50 split or a 60-40 split. They're going to be happy. They're going to make a little extra money. You're going to pocket some cash, and that's not a bad deal. I'm so old. I played music back in the cassette days, and I made more money selling cassettes that I made at home. I had like a Tascam 4-track cassette thing, and so I made a master tape. Then I bought a cassette deck that had two cassettes in it, and you could use they had like a duplication control, so you could put the master cassette into the one and then play on the and then record onto the other cassette, and I'd go make 100 copies of those. It would take me a weekend of just kind of round the clock of changing the tapes out. And then once I had my tapes, I had like some little J-card inserts for the cassette thing made at a local printer, which cost me just a small amount. And I'd sell these for, $8 or $10 or whatever, and people bought them like crazy. So I made quite good money just selling these cassettes. Later on, I made a recording in a proper studio and made CDs, and those sold okay. But I made way more money making these self-produced cassettes. And people liked them, and I had people had one guy actually contact me years after the fact. I don't know if I come play at his wedding, because one of the songs on that cassette was one of his favorite songs for him and his wife. It was meaningful to them or something like that. It was a wedding; they were renewing their vows, something like that. But it was a kind of a neat thing. The set list: how much music do you need to play? Depends. You figure 40 songs for maybe a 3 to 4 hour night. You're going to have a break here and there, but you want to have at least 40 songs in your song list. Will you take requests? We talked about that a little bit. If every now and again you run into an odd venue. There's one up in Alaska I used to play at. They called me up and they said, "Hey, can you play a whole night of originals?" And fortunately, I could. So they hired me. The reason why they did that is because they didn't have to pay the ASCAP, BMI, your licensing things, because for a business, that's a big chunk. And if you're playing if you're serving food and you've just got a radio playing in the background or a CD player, well, they will sue you if you've got that going and you're not paying the artist the royalties, because that's considered a performance. And if you come in and you're doing cover tunes, guess what? You're covering that artist, and they're going to have to pay. So they would ask sometimes, can you play a whole night of just originals? And I was fortunate that I could. If you don't have a whole night worth of originals, tell them, and that's fine. But it's an interesting way. It's an interesting situation. So that covers kind of playing at coffee houses and open mics. We'll talk about playing some bigger venues a little bit later and on another video. But I thank you for watching. Be sure, if this is helpful to you, like, subscribe, and share. If you're a veteran performer and you have some wisdom you want to pass on to people just coming up, please use the comments and share that. I welcome those. And if there's something you want to see in the future or have a question, please put that in the comments too. It gives me good ideas, seeds for videos and things in the future. So I thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time here on the channel. Bye-bye.